If you're looking for a new way to support Side Mission, check out Dubby.gg, an energy supplement company trying to make a difference. Make sure to use code SIDEMISSION for 15% off your order. Thank you, Dubby, for sponsoring this episode, and we hope you enjoy.
Welcome into the newest episode of Side Mission. I, like always, am your host, Rusty Ellis, joined by the boys, Kyle Lynch and Matt Beck. And today is the big one, fellas. It is our Side Mission Top 10 Games of the Year episode, our fourth edition of this episode. It's kind of crazy, fellas, to think that we're already getting ready for year 4 as a podcast. It's been a lot of fun. If you'll remember, our first game of the year ever was in 2020, the first year we were a podcast. We gave it to Last of Us Part 2. That episode is not available on our Spotify because that episode is currently owned by a company that I will not, they're getting the Voldemort treatment. I will not name them and give them any kind of credit on here. They're an awful company with awful people working there. But I digress. 2021, our first game of the year episode on here was Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. 2022, last year, it was Elden Ring, a great battle between Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok, I thought, for Game of the Year. This year, fellas, we got an interesting top 5. I think that this list is very interesting. Looking at it now on my phone, I think that objectively, thinking about all the games that we played this year, I do believe we got this year's list correct. I don't know if I could say that in years past, but I think that for all the games that we talked about and reviewed, I'm pretty happy with the 10 that we landed on. I do want to get out in front of one thing. And I think, Matt, you mentioned this to me a few days ago about, a certain game that has gotten a lot of hype that is not going to be on our list. And I'm sure there's going to be people that ask, where in the world is Baldur's Gate 3? And the simple truth of that is we played that game. It wasn't really for us. We didn't do a full review of it. And instead of crucifying it unfairly just because it didn't really land with us, we just didn't really review it, so that's why it's not going to be on the list ultimately. But as always, fellas, the first place we're going to start is the games that got votes but did not make the list. Normally, this is a very long portion of this episode. This year it is not, because there are only 4 games in this category. Starting with the games that got the least amount of votes. In fact, actually, as I'm looking at this now, all of these games actually got the same amount of points. I thought that there was going to be one that stood out, but I really just noticed that these all had 2 points. Octopath Traveler 2, a game that me and Matt played, a really, really damn good JRPG. Super Mario RPG, the most recent game on this list, a really damn good game, just didn't make the list. Mortal Kombat 1, again, kind of sensing a trend here. Really damn good game that just didn't make the list. I loved Mortal Kombat 1, especially the story. Thought it was really good, even though, Kyle, I know you said you had some complaints as far as, or not complaints, that's a bad way of saying it, critiques as far as things that kind of took a step back from Mortal Kombat 11. And then finally, and this was probably the biggest surprise of the games that didn't make it onto the list, Diablo 4 did not make it onto the list. And I was kind of surprised by that because we all really enjoyed Diablo 4. I know this is a great year for gaming, so obviously just, the 10 that came out that ended up placing above these just happened to be a little bit better. But Diablo 4, I was kind of surprised, didn't make the list. So those are our 4 honorable mentions. Again, Octopath Traveler 2, Super Mario RPG, Mortal Kombat 1, Diablo 4. Fellas, before we get into the list, I want to hear one more honorable mention from each of you. A game that maybe, just maybe, didn't make your top 10 but was close. Kyle, I'll let you go first, and then Matt, I'll let you go after.
So, my honorable mention is actually going to be a little bit weird, a little bit different this year, because it's a little bit more of a recent game that only I have been playing, but the boys have not heard me shut up about this game. Lethal Company is my honorable mention, because this game was $10 on Steam. Entire thing is made by one guy. It's not a team of developers. This is an indie game made by one guy. And I said at the beginning of this year that I wanted to play a lot more indie games. That was my goal for this year, and I've done that a lot. I've done that so much that I ended up finding this indie game, Lethal Company, that I love. I play it all the time. It's a really good horror game. You can play it with 3 other people online. The modding community is crazy about it. Definitely check it out if you have the chance and you have a PC.
Matt, what about you?
So a game that did not make my list, but was just very close to being in there was actually Sea of Stars.
Good
I
one.
didn't know much about this game going into it. I just knew that it was from a new developer I knew nothing about, and they created a fantastic RPG that I love the battle system. It's very similar to kind of the Mario RPG where you tap a button at a certain time to reduce damage or increase damage. I like the story to it. It's pretty like very easy to understand. It's not like super convoluted like a lot of RPGs tend to be. High Kingdom Hearts, and one thing that has stuck with me is just the music is gorgeous. The graphics are stunning. They are like a 2D sprite based like very similar to older RPGs, and it's a game that like I want to get back into it and play a lot more. I probably put about 12 hours into it, and it's a game that's going to stick with me.
I love the variety here because Kyle picked more of an indie game. Matt, you picked a JRPG, and I think the game that
Yeah,
I'm going to go with is one that I think you both probably expected to actually make my list. Mine is actually going to be Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon because
Interesting.
and it hurt to not put this on the list.
yeah,
But when I thought about my top 10, I put a higher stock into what games could I go back right now and jump into right away and not really miss a beat. And I felt like, just full disclosure, my 10th place game was Mortal Kombat 1. That was my 10th place game. So I thought that I could jump a little bit easier back into Mortal Kombat than I could Bayonetta Origins. Bayonetta Origins, I would maybe need to look up kind of where I was at in the story and stuff like that. But in terms of art design and just I think just unique gameplay, because it really was unique. I don't think I've played a game like Bayonetta Origins. I really enjoyed that game. I can't wait to get back into it more, and I do plan on getting back into it more because the story's really good, the gameplay is a lot of fun, the puzzles are the highlight, and I think that, again, the art style, some of the best in gaming all year. Fellas, it's time to get into the actual list.
let's get
And
into it.
I'm excited because for once, and I don't think that we've done this in a single Game of the Year episode, I get to start with Matt on this one. Because normally I start with Kyle. I think last year I may have started on Thacker. So Matt, we get to talk about the 10th place game first, and it made the cut.
Oh, okay.
It made the cut by, I believe, 1 point. Yeah, so actually we had a tiebreaker for this one.
Oh yeah.
So we had a tiebreaker. We settled it. So number 10, it was a big year for Nintendo. It starts at our 10th spot. Number 10 is Fire Emblem Engage. So this was one that I had pretty high on my list. I'm not going to lie. Fire Emblem Engage landed pretty high on my list just because it was the first Fire Emblem game that I've actually finished. I thought that in terms, again, you look at art style and performance and everything on a technical level, Matt, I thought this
Oh
game
yeah.
looked really good. It ran really
Oh
well.
yeah.
And I just loved the use of the emblems as well in the story. I thought that was such a
Yes.
unique gameplay element that all these emblems from past games, including from Fire Emblem Three Houses, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, you see all of these older characters. And for someone who's still new to Fire Emblem like me, it still was pretty cool to kind of have this greatest hits kind of collection of all these great characters in one game. I really loved this game, Matt.
Yeah, I did too. It is Fire Emblem to the very core, and the introduction of the emblems was a fantastic way to celebrate Fire Emblem's anniversary. Just being able to summon all of these characters that a lot of majority of them people will know because from Smash Brothers, because Fire Emblem wasn't very big in the States or outside of Japan really. It was the Super Smash Brothers series that brought Fire Emblem over into this country and everywhere else in the world. And just being able to know all these characters and like makes me want to go back and play older Fire Emblem games. Even this is before the option to opt out of permanent death. I don't think that I could do permanent death playthroughs, honestly. But yeah, this game was incredible. I was so proud of Rusty when he told me he beat it. I haven't even beat it myself, and that's saying something because I typically like to beat any of my games that are Nintendo because I am that fanboy, I guess that you like to call me.
The Nintendo
Um,
Show.
there you go. But yeah, I was so happy with it. And I love the fact that Nintendo just released it out of nowhere. Like, no, it was rumored for a really long time, and there were even screenshots that got leaked, and a lot of people were making fun of the main character's hair looking like the Crest logo on the toothpaste, and I was like, when is this game coming out? Because this leak happened months before the game's official release or announcement. I mean, and when we got it, I was so happy with it, and I definitely one of these days do plan on going back to beat it.
Yeah, this was one of those that when it came out, I poured hours upon hours upon hours into it. I thought that the story really got a hold of me really, really quickly, and I'm glad that this game came out early in the year because we didn't have a ton out at the time, so I could put all of my effort into it. We did have one other game that was out around that time that you might see here in a couple spots a couple spots. I think you'll see a familiar name of a game that came out around that time, but Fire Emblem Engage, I will say the last thing before we move on to number 9 and we talk about a game for Kyle is I felt like this game got an unfair amount of undue criticism. A lot of people said that it looked like a mobile game and played like a mobile game, and I don't know where that criticism came from. I've never heard somebody like actually go in depth as far as why they felt that way, because I felt like Fire Emblem Engage was a 9 out of 10 game from the jump, and I loved every bit of it. So I'm happy as a new Fire Emblem fan, and as somebody who has now gone back recently and has actually been playing a little bit more of Three Houses, because again, I got really deep into a playthrough on that, and now I've jumped back into it, and I'm really enjoying Three Houses. I'm glad that Fire Emblem Engage made the list. So number 9, Kyle. I started with Matt. Now I get to go to you. And the good news for you is it's another Nintendo game. It's your favorite company, Nintendo.
Oh, no.
We say that Matt's the shill, but in reality, it's actually you that are the shill. Number 9 is a game, and again, I think that it just goes to show when a game like this is down at number 9. This is a game that I think in a normal year, as high quality as it was, could have competed potentially for Game of the Year. Stacked a year like this, it's down at our number 9 spot, Kyle, but it's a game that I know you loved. It is Pikmin 4.
Dude, Pikmin 4. That was a game I didn't know if I'd ever see. I am obviously a GameCube, diehard fan. Anything on the GameCube was my favorite. It's one of my favorite consoles, and Pikmin was one of the first games that I had on there. And it took them a long time to, make Pikmin 3, because Pikmin 1 and 2 were GameCube, and Pikmin 3, I believe, didn't come out till the Wii U. And,
Yeah.
By then, a lot of people, had kind of forgotten about this franchise. It was just this quirky little GameCube game that only had, 2 games, and they actually ported Pikmin 3 over to the Switch, which I played the hell out of because I didn't know that, we were ever going to get the 4th one. So that was like my end game until finally they gave us the probably best looking environment I've ever seen in a Switch game with Pikmin 4. I mean, holy shit. Nintendo doesn't go for graphics a lot. They mainly pride themselves on their gameplay of their exclusives, and they knocked it out of the park. Like, I was just so blown away with how gorgeous Pikmin 4 was. The gameplay was everything I could have asked for. It felt like they updated so much and took things from the sequel, from Pikmin 2, that for some reason were taken out of the 3rd game, and they put them in the 4th game, which I really liked that they, listened to fans and they went back to a formula that everybody seemed to enjoy. Looking at you, Zelda. And I think that, honestly, if I were to rank all the Pikmin games, Pikmin 4 would now be my favorite over Pikmin 2. It was just that good.
Man, throwing shade at Zelda there. We're just going to pretend like Zelda isn't significantly further up the list, but I'm just kidding. Well, I'm not kidding. It is, but I'm also going to clip that moment where you said Nintendo doesn't go for graphics, and I'm absolutely playing that audio back in our group chat the next time you go on a tirade about how Nintendo games don't look good. I'm absolutely playing that back the next time that happens. I'm just kidding. It's all good fun. So, no, Pikmin 4, I think, Kyle, and I think you'd agree with this, I think the sign of a really, really good game is one that you can sink hours and hours into without really realizing it. And Pikmin 4 this year, I think that was one of the easiest games, I think, to just put 2, 3, 4 hours in at a time and almost not even realize it because you're just having fun. You're making progress with, whatever level you're on and, building up your materials and all that. It just felt like it was so easy to binge. And I
Yeah,
like that. It helps that it's a high quality game. It looks really damn good, like you said. And I will say, that was a constant positive for almost every Nintendo game this year. There weren't many
true.
Nintendo games that looked and ran poorly outside of you, Mortal Kombat 1, but that barely counts. So I think that again, for all the talk of the Switch being underpowered and compared to the PS5 and the Series X and Series S, yes, it absolutely is. But for all that talk, I feel like Nintendo did a good job of maximizing the technology in most of their games this year. So Pikmin 4 comes in at number 9. Again, most years I feel like that game could be significantly higher, and I could say the same about Fire Emblem Engage. I feel like those two being as low as they are just shows how stacked this year is. So number 8. You heard me kind of reference there was a game that came out around the same time Fire Emblem Engage came out. And fellas, one constant this year, and we've kind of seen this over the last couple of years, we've gotten some damn good remakes the last couple of years, if you catch my drift on what number 8 might be. So number 8 is one of the best remakes that we've gotten. Is it the best remake this year? I don't know. You'll have to stick around for the rest of the list and we'll find out. But I think we can all agree that our 8th place game was a damn good game, and that is Dead Space. And again, just I thought, as far as remakes go, Kyle, I feel like there's not many remakes that have done as good a job as this one did of bringing a game that was older, that maybe played a little bit clunkier because of the era in which it came out. And obviously Dead Space came out back in the PS3 era, back in the Xbox 360 era. It'd be very easy for a game that was released all the way back then, which makes me feel really fucking old, saying all the way back then in the PS3 era, because it really wasn't that long ago. But it'd be really easy for a game that came out in that era, I think, to maybe still have that clunky feel. And I think that from everything down to the controls, the movement, just performance, and again, everything on a technical scale, I feel like this Dead Space remake, Kyle, is one that should be studied for several years on how to do a remake.
100%. I am a huge horror game fan. I don't watch a lot of horror movies because I'm a pussy, but I will play any horror game. I am a huge fan of them, and Dead Space, that's a big franchise. When they said that they were remaking it, I was like, oh shit, they're gonna have to really do it faithful, because this is a franchise that if you haven't played it, you at least know of it. You have heard it in some way or form, and now you absolutely should play it. This remake changed so much from the original game while also keeping, keeping everything that everybody loved about it. The new sound design, I think, is what really amplifies this remake as quality, because holy shit, dude, especially with the Pulse 3D headset, I was terrified in some of these parts. Those jump scares were no joke, and I even knew some of them were coming and it was still happening. Like, man, it was just so good. The combat felt so smooth, and the use of the DualSense I felt was really, really good in this game. From a graphical standpoint, wow, did they kill it. It was so gorgeous. And the lighting, I think, that is something in this game that really, really needed to be improved on this, console era. Because in the older games, they're kind of limited by their tech, but man, I just cannot get over how scary that game was. I mean, it was so good. It was so good. Like you said, remakes are, when they're good, they're good. And this was one of the best this year, if not my personal favorite from this year.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a big argument that this could be considered the best remake this year. I think that I've heard so many people talk about, and this was what I was excited for, Kyle. I think we spoke about this several times. Was I have heard several stories of just how terrifying Dead Space was, especially way back then, the original version. And I always said, is it really that scary? I've played a lot of the Resident Evil games, and I've played horror games. Like, again, I don't play a ton of them, Kyle, because like you, I'm a little bit of a bitch. So
I feel that.
But I don't know. Like, there was part of me going into this that was like, okay, was the horror aspect of it overrated? And man, early on, I learned it was not overrated. It was a very scary game. It held up. The gameplay was so smooth and fluid. I loved the gunplay specifically. And I loved the animation of being able to shoot the limbs off of all the enemies that you ran into. I loved that personally. And Kyle, I have to say, of all the platinums I've seen you go for, this might be the one that, is second most insane behind Crash 4 that you've not finished up yet. And I salute you, sir, for being able to finish that because, man, I couldn't do it.
This was a rough platinum. It took a lot out of me, especially because it makes you do multiple playthroughs. But one of those playthroughs has to be on the hardest difficulty. That was brutal. Like, holy shit, dude. You've heard me say this multiple times on this show that if a game has difficulty trophies, I usually will not go for it. And that just says how much I loved this game, was that I was willing to put myself through hell in that hardest difficulty for the platinum. But man, I don't ever want to do that again. Like, definitely play this game, but if you're going for completion, just know you're gonna be in for some shit. It's gonna be a long, long playthrough. But yeah, like you said, it was definitely one of my hardest platinums to date.
Yeah, and again, like you have my full respect, and you already did. But man, that was one that I watched you do part of that one, and I did not. I don't have the fortitude to do that. So moving on down to our number 7 spot, and there's some statements that we just made about remakes that are going to be really interesting when I reveal what 7 is, because I loved the Dead Space remake and think that it is one of the gold standards for remakes moving forward. And I think that, again, if a company follows the blueprint of a remake, I think Dead Space is one of the games, specifically this version, is one of the games that people should use when crafting the remake. I think another game that should be the gold standard for that, and I think was just a little bit better, and that's why it placed higher on my list. It's why it placed higher on Matt's list. I'm so excited to talk a little bit more about Resident Evil 4, our number 7 game. Because, again, phenomenal remake, Matt. I think that we just talked a lot about how the Dead Space remake modernized Dead Space quite a bit. And I think that that's the biggest aspect, or the biggest improvement, I think, in Dead Space Remake was that modernization of an older game. I think Resident Evil 4, Matt, that's a game that people have talked about how timeless that story is, how timeless that level design is. And I think it all holds up. And I think that the number one thing they improved was how the game feels to play, how the game controls, and most importantly, adding on to different levels, like the section on the lake where you can explore the entire lake instead of it just being a linear section with that boss fight. So, Matt, Resident Evil 4, again, it was a Game of the Year finalist at the Game Awards. Pretty damn good game.
Yeah, this is absolutely Capcom's, like, one of their ultimate, like, remakes. Like, they changed the game when it comes to remakes, because we got remake of 1 and 2, 3, I believe. And now with 4, this is the one I was the most excited about, because I remember this was such a generational, like, placed itself in its current generation as one of the best games of all time when it released back during, I believe it was first released on the GameCube. And it has just been one of those where you just go back to it, and they released it so many times to the GameCube, to the PlayStation 2, the PlayStation 3, and even the Wii. Like, this game is timeless. And when they remade it, and I saw the trailer for the first time, I was just stunned, because the game itself, back when it first released, was quite the looker itself. Like, it was one of those, like, generational defining games as far as, like, the graphics go, and that still holds up today with the remake. And the fact that they brought in that kind of more open space to it, where it doesn't feel as so like corridor like the previous game did, give you a lot more to do. The shooting gallery, that's quite fun, very irritating. I would possibly break a controller if I continued playing that. It's because that was very frustrating. But yeah, this is how it's done. This is how remakes are done, and I'm very hopeful that Capcom keeps that same energy if they end up remaking 5 or 6. Obviously, I'm not going to say remake 7 because that's entirely different, an entirely different generation.
I hope they
But yeah,
don't do six.
this one will stick with me for a very long time, and I'm so happy that we got this. Like, it was such a great game. Leon's one of my favorite Resident Evil characters, and the boss fights in this game are just gorgeous. I like the fact that they just have like their own alternate ways to defeat them. The music was fantastic. Like I said, the graphics are just something that I love to go back to, and I want to replay it on the new TV that I got here recently. So if I ever do a new Game Plus, new game uh, playthrough, I'm definitely excited to do that again.
Yeah, I said when I first got this game and when I first started playing it, I said that I felt very gate capped on it because, again, I'd heard that Resident Evil 4 was a really damn good game, but I didn't know that it was one of the greatest survival horror games of all time. And when I played it, I was like, "Holy shit!" Again, I see the hype here. I see a game that's got a really good really good story. The level design is top notch, especially the opening section with in the village with all the villagers, and you're having to run around and survive after you get caught or after you get spotted. And after surviving for a bit, the bell in the church tower rings and they all run. And Leon's got his infamous line about where'd everybody go? Bingo. Like some of those lines that they brought back, I was really, really pleased to hear for the first time in this game, just because, again, these are lines that are iconic. They're lines that, are they cheesy? Are they corny? Are they weird? Are they campy? Sure. But honestly, that's a lot of what made Resident Evil 4 Resident Evil 4. A lot of people love that game because of how campy it could be. So I'm a big fan of this game, and I'm glad to see that it made the final list as well. Now, number 6 is an interesting one because I love this game and it made it onto my list. I believe it made it onto all of our lists. I know, Kyle, it made it pretty high on your list. And it's a game that when I first finished this game, I wasn't sure if it would make it to the list. And it had nothing to do with the gameplay. It had nothing to do with the story, nothing to do with the writing, nothing to do with the characters. It had everything to do with, well, let's just say suboptimal performance at launch. Now, supposedly, it has been fixed. I have not downloaded this 120 gigabyte juggernaut back onto my PS5 just yet to check it because, well, up until recently, I didn't really have the space for it. But it's made the list. It's coming in at number 6, just outside of the top 5. Kyle, I'm excited to talk about it again. Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Again, a damn good follow-up to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And I think that Survivor, Kyle, the best way was how you said it when we reviewed it. It's the definition of what a sequel should be.
I think this definitely holds true, especially after seeing Spider-Man 2, which I love that game. But there is one thing that happens in every sequel that's I forgot all of my abilities and I lost all of my equipment. And they did not do this in Survivor. They said, listen, all of the abilities that you unlocked in the first game, we're giving them to you at the very beginning, and we're going to create new abilities in this game to build on what we already had. Which tells me that if they make another game, it's going to be even crazier than this, which I had no idea what they were going to add. I was like, man, I thought that the first game was pretty packed, and wow, did they manage to surprise me. Just, like you said, I really wish that this game worked better at launch. That is the biggest negative and what really held it back. But the story was so good. It was, in my opinion, I think that the story of Survivor was better than Spider-Man 2. And it's okay if other people don't share that opinion with me, because Spider-Man 2 was a really, really damn good game. But in terms of a sequel, I think that this game found a way to build on everything the first game had made, and I just absolutely loved that, and I have to praise it because it's something I would like to see other games do going forward. I would like to see, like, for example, if I had started up God of War Ragnarok and I had to go back and get the Blades of Chaos again, I would have been pissed because I'd have been like, what, you just go bury him again? I was glad that, like that game gave them to you at the start and you keep going to get more weapons. That needs to be the standard for sequels, for trilogies, because if you're just redoing what you did and making it a little bit bigger, scaling the map to be larger, giving me more abilities to unlock, I don't see that as unique as how, this was done.
Kyle still fighting the battle of Game of the Year last year there with the God of War Ragnarok reference. I feel you, bro. I feel you, bro. You still fighting the I would say fighting the good fight, but I didn't vote for it, so.
Damn!
Couldn't be me. I'm just kidding. But I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right that it would really suck if we had to re-earn all these abilities like another game that somehow made the top 3 made us do. Yeah, y'all are getting a little bit of a teaser there. If you played big games this year, you know the game I'm talking about. I don't have to even say the name. But I'm hoeing that game for no reason. I loved that game all the same. But I think that Star Wars Jedi Survivor, what I liked was when this game wanted to go for something, it went for it. It didn't just tease something and then say, okay, now forget about it. Like, it teased several times that something wasn't right whenever you met up with Seer and with Cordova. It made it, you feel very uneasy around this group of people, and then your friend betrays you. Darth Vader shows up at some point, and I think that Seer's death in that fight against Darth Vader, one of the most emotional moments in a game all year, a moment that actually made me pause the game and I had to sit there and think about what had just happened. It was crazy moment in the story. And I also love this, and this is, I have to make this point because there are some people out there, I'm not going to name names, Tom, but I'm not going to name names. Tom, I don't think Tom's ever actually, I don't think he's actually crapped on what I'm about to say. But I think that love stories in a game or in a movie, in any form of media, can be a really good storytelling tool if done properly. It can feel very unnecessary if done improperly. And the story between Cal and Merrin, I loved that they teased it in the first game. They talk about it a little bit more and hint at it a little bit more earlier in this one, and then they actually have them get together. It's a shipping that I was all in on. I've never been more in on a ship that wasn't Katara and Zuko. And I'm still fighting that fight. And it frustrates me, but I'm glad that they hinted at that and they actually followed through on it, though. And I like that a lot because I felt that they really developed that well. They're both survivors. They're both very, very similar people. And again, it felt natural. That was the big thing, is it felt natural. And I liked that. So Star Wars Jedi Survivor, a game, and Kyle, I got to be honest with you, a platinum, I still want to go back and get at some point. So in the new year, we might have to put that one on the list. And Matt, I know you did too. So we might have to put that one on the list. So all of us can go back and do that because that's a platinum. I still absolutely want to finish that one. So, fellas, we've made it to the top 5. And boys, let me tell y'all, these 5 games, there's no surprises here. These are heavy hitters. These are heavy hitters in gaming this year. And really, we're getting started with one at 5 that I really thought would be a lot higher. And I want to say that I'm shocked it's not higher, but at the same time, I'm not really shocked because the 4 in front of it are all great games. In fact, I believe that our next 3 games... Yes, okay, so I'm not going to finish that sentence because I don't want to give anything away. I'm not going to finish that sentence at all, so fuck y'all. But number 5 was a phenomenal game. And again, when we talk about sequels, it's a game that really helped show that when you build onto what you do, instead of tearing the player down and forcing them to relearn and redo everything, it makes your sequel better. It's an incredible story. You heard Kyle reference it earlier, coming in at number 5, Spider-Man 2. And again,
Woo!
It would be game of the year in another year. It could be game of the year in another year. This year just happened to be really freaking stacked. And I think that fifth, hey, you made the top five. It could definitely be worse. You could have not made the list whatsoever. So, Matt, we all played Spider-Man 2. We all platinumed it before we recorded our review of it. We all talked about it as if it could potentially be a Game of the Year favorite. It obviously didn't finish there for us, but Spider-Man 2 was a damn good game, Matt, and I think that it finishing at 5, that shouldn't go unmentioned, that we all absolutely loved this game. I know that we all had fun platinuming this game.
Oh yeah, it was a thrill, honestly. Like I didn't know what I expected because Spider-Man 1 and Miles Morales were done so well, and I just couldn't possibly imagine what they could do to up the ante here and make this game stand out amongst such incredible incredible games. And just from the get-go, you are thrust into one of the most like impressive sequences in a video game with the fight with Spider-Man and Miles Morales Spider-Man and going up against the Sandman. Like this was just straight up out of nowhere. And honestly, the game did not slow down from there. Like each big sequence was just like more impressive than the next. And at a certain point, like when you actually get to play as Venom, was probably one of the most standout like moments in the game. When you are breaking out of the place that
Oscorp,
Harry
yeah.
and Oscorp built, and the quests themselves, they had some really good ones here. Like it wasn't completely repetitive. Like I mean, fighting the crime was, as always. I mean, it's just the same thing here or there. Beat up some guys in a certain time limit, put out some fires, that sort of thing. Stop speeding cars. But like I said, there's a lot of things in this game that stick out, that define it. Like the sequence with Miles and Black Cat was one of the most impressive things at the sanatorium. I said that right? Please tell me I said that right. Doctor Strange's thing. Sanitarium. Yeah. That sequence right there. The sequence with yeah,
Well, I'm
Sanatorium.
about to
There we
say,
go.
I don't think either one of you were right. I was like, what are y'all? What are we? I was like, I'm just gonna let this train wreck happen real quick.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I'm
There
glad
are
I was
Marvel
muted for
fans.
that, so you didn't hear what I said.
There are Marvel fans that are listening right now that are cringing. At what we
Oh,
said.
Yeah, those face bombs can be heard all around the world right now. But also the scene that has Peter Miles going against Craven on the ship, and then that whole sequence with the giant rotor saving the people on the dock, and Miles having to come to like terms with like his revenge story against Martin Lee. And then, Peter's got his own thing going on, struggling to keep a job and keep his relationship with Mary Jane and still be Spider-Man at the same time. As well as, we get some of the most impressive voice acting from, is his name Yuri Lynn? How you say it?
Yuri
I can't.
Lowenthal.
Yeah, yeah. Very impressive voice acting with him, like how he just changes his voice when he's starting to change and after he gets the black suit. Um, a lot of character development between Miles and his mom, Peter, Mary Jane, dealing with the death of Aunt May from Spider-Man 1. Like, there's just so much that they crammed into this game, and it's almost great. It does have its flaws. Unfortunately, the game is pretty short. Like, once you platinum the game, I mean, there's no new game plus at the moment. There's not really much to do until DLC comes out. But I mean, I really enjoyed my time with it. Insomniac is still showing off that they're one of the best developers at PlayStation with this Ratchet and Clank. Like, I can't wait to see what they do next with Wolverine.
I think that is ultimately what did drop it down my list, because if you go back to the review that we did, Kyle and I both said pretty definitively that this was our Game of the Year favorite, and it was that simple. I think, Kyle, the big criticism was I didn't think that New Game Plus was really needed that much at first. Honestly, after platinuming it, New Game Plus would have been nice, just because I didn't really feel the need to play any more of it. It wasn't the need. It's not that I don't feel the need to revisit it when they drop their, incoming DLC. Absolutely, I'll go back and I'll play it. I think all three of us will. I think we'll probably all review it. But it just felt like content as a whole might have been lacking in terms of the quantity, maybe. I thought the quality of what we got was really high, and we could talk about some of the side missions as well. LOL, there's a plug. Because I think that the biggest standout side mission was the mission with Howard and his pigeons. I mean, that's a very, very simple mission. You don't fight. You don't do any combat whatsoever. And man, that's the side mission that everybody talked about after the game dropped. So, Kyle, why did the game fall a little bit further onto your list? I'm curious. What was it that made the difference for you?
For me, I think that, when I first played it, this game was so hyped up. It was so anticipated. I was very, very excited for it. And, you know, it's not in any way that this game is bad or that it's just that, you know, I really I really enjoyed this game when it came out, but when I looked at my playtime of some other games, I don't think games need to be super long, and I'm actually kind of against games being 100 to 200 hours long. Like, that's just excessive, and especially in a year like this, if you're an RPG fan, good luck finishing every single RPG, big RPG that's coming out this year. Some smaller games are nice.
And I'm
However,
trying.
I think that, yeah, for real. However, I think that, as you get a little bit further away, like Rusty said, a little bit more content would have been nicer because I platinumed that game in 28 hours. That is really, really fast, considering, Armored Core and Lies of P both took me 80 hours. But I'm not. Honestly, I don't feel. I would still give this game a 9 to a 10. I think that this game was great. I loved it. I looked at all the games I played this year, and I had to make that sacrifice of putting it lower because there were just some games that I played so much more that I felt like I enjoyed more. You know?
Yeah, and I think you're right about that. I think I agree with you on just about every point you made there. I think that sometimes in a year that's this stacked, I think it's some game has to fall a little bit further on the list. It's the thing I always say when it comes to ranking these lists. Some game has to come in at 10th. And it might be a game you love, it might be a game you played very little of, it might be a game that you never even picked up. But in a top 10 list, not every game can be number one. Not every game can make the top three, and not every game can make the list, period. I mean, this year we saw several great games that didn't even make the cut on any of our lists. So I think that Spider-Man 2, it's important to point out, it's a phenomenal sequel. It's a great game. Just because it doesn't do anything groundbreaking does not mean that it's not worth your money. If you haven't played it and we didn't just spoil the shit out of the game for you, which if we did, I'm sorry. But you should have also probably known better coming here to our Game of the Year episode. If you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend it because it is a very, very fun game to play. Kyle, you mentioned it is a very, very quick platinum. I think I did my platinum in 24 hours. So, yeah, like it's not
something like that.
It's not a lengthy platinum. It's a pretty straightforward one, but there's certainly tougher platinums out there. So, on to number 4, a game that you can't platinum because, well, Nintendo doesn't have achievements yet, and it probably never will. A game that made it very, very high on, I believe, all 3 of our lists, and a game that, when we look back, I think we will look back as this is the best game in this series and this version of games for this franchise. Because I think we saw the best 2D Mario game of all time. Because at number 4, we have Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Another phenomenal game that came out from Nintendo this year. Matt, we said it best in the episode, and I've said it so many times, it probably sounds like a broken record. But this is what happens when Nintendo goes all in on wacky and fun. You get Super Mario Bros. Wonder. It's a phenomenal game for it.
Yes, I was so happy when they announced this game, just saying for the first time, because the 2D Mario franchise has been stuck with the new Super Mario Bros. Style, and it's gotten pretty old because we had new Super Mario's on the DS, we had the one on the Wii, the one on the Wii U. We had New Super Mario Bros. 2 on the 3DS, and the art style for that was just it stayed the same almost throughout. But then, how long it has been since, not including the re-release of Mario Bros. Deluxe from the Wii U to the Switch, but it had been such a long time since we had seen Mario, a 2D Mario game. that took so many, so many like different like directions, and it all coming together through these developers. They had no crunch time. They were just do exactly what they wanted to do, use any of their ideas, and they absolutely did it, especially with the Wonder Flower, the way it changes up each level like its own way, from basically hanging upside down to like these giant sheep buffalo looking things causing a stampede. It is just incredible. And the only thing that I would say that I didn't think that this game was very strong in were the boss fights, but outside of that, I really have no complaints. I think the badge system was really cool. The way you could replay levels in a completely different way by just changing what badges you have. And then the multiplayer was so much fun with the online aspect, where you could not necessarily like play with your friends, but you are playing with your friends. They're basically ghosts. You can help each other out. You can save each other if you end up dying and you're stuck in a little bubble, and they can pop you. They can give gifts with these little like standouts. I was so happy. This game is just definitely one of the best Mario games since Mario Odyssey, in my opinion.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Kyle, I have to ask you an honest question here, brother. I need an honest answer. Did you play this game under the influence?
Absolutely.
Bro.
Oh, man. I had some Wonder Flower before I hit the Wonder Flower in this game. Let me tell you what, this game...
Boy said, I showed this game what Mushroom was.
Whoa, no, not that. This game was so creative. Man, I have so many positive things to say about this game, because like Matt, I was very tired of the new Super Mario Bros. Style. I liked that double pack that they did. Where they came out with, what was this, Super Mario 3D World, and was that the one that gave us Bowser's Fury?
Yeah, Super Mario 3D Worlds, yeah.
When that happened, I actually thought that they were going to be taking, Super Mario 3D World in, I thought that they were going to be doing something with that, and they were like, oh, that gave me the idea of both, we're getting a new Odyssey that Bowser's Fury was testing for new Odyssey stuff, and that we're going to get a new Super Mario 3D World kind of game. And when they announced Wonder a few years later, that surprised me, because, man, this game really, really, really redid the 2D side-scroller Mario formula in a way that I think will stick for a long time. This game was so good that we actually... we thought that it had a chance of winning Game of the Year, legitimately, because that's just how damn good it was. 2D side-scroller fans are eating good right now. They're eating so good.
To be honest, if it had won Game of the Year, I wouldn't have complained.
Same. I wouldn't have been mad. This game
I think that,
did a lot.
Yeah. I think that Nintendo has to be commended, and, spoiler alert, as we get into the top 3 here soon, we're not done talking about Nintendo. But I think that Nintendo really does need to be commended, that if this is the last full year of the Switch, because it's been widely rumored that in fall 2024 is when we're going to supposedly get their next console. If this is the last full year of the Switch being their main focus, I think they went out with a damn bang. They had bangers and bangers, and like there's several games. So for full context, everybody, like we don't count remasters for Game of the Year. So Metroid Prime Remastered was awesome, but it wasn't eligible. Kirby Return to Dreamland Deluxe was awesome. It wasn't eligible. We obviously talked about Bayonetta Origins earlier. I did, and that was a great game. We had Fire Emblem Engage. We had Pikmin 4. We had Wonder. Super Mario RPG was great. There were great games upon great after great game after great game after great game this year from Nintendo. So again, if this was the last full year of the Switch, it was an awesome year for them. And Kyle, to your point, I hope that this same level of wackiness is used in their next 3D Mario game, because Odyssey 2, or whatever they choose to call it, I feel like that in this kind of wacky, fun style, I feel like could be a game of the generation type game, because Mario Odyssey is already a 10 out of 10 game. Imagine adding in kind of this level of uniqueness, this level of atmosphere, these effects, these crazy levels. I would love to see them put that same kind of wackiness into Odyssey 2, or again, whatever their next 3D Mario game is. So Super Mario Bros. Wonder was phenomenal. Let's get into the top 3. And you've already heard me reference it. And it makes me more excited to talk about the top 2 because y'all are going to realize what games we have not talked about yet. And the top 2 made me very happy when I compiled the list and it landed the way it landed. I'm very, very happy about that. But before we get there, we got to talk about number 3. Number 3 was a game that came out a little bit earlier this year. Could have won Game of the Year at the Game Awards. I was hoping it would over Baldur's Gate 3 because, let's be real, I got tired of hearing about Baldur's Gate 3. I think we all did. But, phenomenal game. A game that Matt and I both loved. I think Kyle loved it a lot as well, even though he had some critiques for it because, spoiler alert, it is his favorite franchise of all time. So coming in at number 3, our final Nintendo Switch game on the list, it is Gollum. No, it's Legend of it's the Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, and again, a game that could have been Game of the Year, and again, in another time, in another universe, in the vast multiverse, Tears of the Kingdom could have won Game of the Year. Full disclosure, I didn't say anything about it because I didn't want to accidentally give it away. Super Mario Bros. Wonder and Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom were actually tied. And the tiebreaker that decided it was while they both got the same number of top 3 votes, Matt, you had Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom as your game of the year. That earned it the tiebreaker. So I'll let you start with us because obviously this is a game we can talk about for a while. Our episode was really in depth, and these two really carried me through it because it was the first Zelda game that I finished. I felt like I was shit on that episode, but you both have told me I wasn't, so I'll just believe you. But Matt, it was your game of the year. Brag on it a little bit. What was it that made this your game of the year?
So Tears of the Kingdom was my game of the year because it was the sequel to one of the best, in my opinion, Zelda games of all time, with Breath of the Wild, like introducing the open world concept. And Nintendo took the open world. This has been done so many times, but they reinvented it to the point where other developers actually started, making games with a very similar open world. On top of that, I think the one thing that makes Tears of the Kingdom my game of the year, what stands out, is just the creativeness that goes into it with the introduction of the Ultra Hand. That device is incredible. Like all the different powers that they introduced in this game, from the Ultra Hand to using Recall, and then the one that the Rise one, I can't remember the name of it right now. What was it? Ascend. Thank you. But just the combination.
Just a word for going up.
Going. all of that just made this game, like I think this is Tears of the Kingdom is a game I put the most hours into of any game I played this year, like well over 100 hours into this game. And I just remember how hype going to the midnight launch for this was, and it's just something that's going to stick with me for a very long time. With using the Ultra Hand, you're able to cause things to stick together, make different vehicles. Like you can approach each of the little dungeons so differently, and they basically did listen to fans. They did bring back a sort of introduction back to dungeons. And one of my all-time favorite ones that sticks out, especially I know Kyle loves this one, is because it's basically the entire section of that game is basically homage to the Wind Waker. With the Rito and everything, the boss fight there, the boss fights in general, just some things that really stick out with me as well. Because no offense to Spider-Man 2, it's not just really pretty cutscene leading off to some things that lead up to another cutscene. Everything is playable. Like there's not a single cutscene that you have to sit through. The fight with Kogera, everything you control it, like going up in the air and attacking him, and then they break out the music. They break out Dragon Roost Island music during that fight. And I know, Kyle, you loved that, didn't you?
Wait a minute, there was a cutscene
for the first time.
That feels like an unnecessary hoeing of Spider-Man 2.
No,
there was a cutscene. What are we talking about?
There's a cutscene before the fight, yes, but then everything right there is just pure gameplay from the moment that you start fighting him to beating him. That's what I was referring to. There was no in-between cuts that led to one section and then fight, and then cutscene, and then back to fighting.
That feels like unnecessary. I can't wait to hose Zelda. I can't wait to hose this game when we get to the top 2. I can't wait. Kyle, go ahead, Kyle. All you.
Man, Tears of the Kingdom. What a mid game. What a piece of shit. Like, I mean, Nintendo could not have put out something more awful. Holy God, I'm just playing. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. This game, Breath of the Wild might not be my favorite style of Zelda games. However, for all the shit that I give that game, it's one of my most played, if not my most played Switch game. I was secretly hyped for Tears of the Kingdom because it's a Zelda game, and I'm always going to love Zelda games, even the bad ones. And this game did not disappoint. I think that I have some critiques personally that are just referenced to other Zelda games and why I like them better. But if I were to critique this game against other games that came out this year, I think it stands pretty high up, because while Mario Wonder and, Sonic Superstars as well, a game that, we didn't talk about, but it also, came out, reinvented the 2D Sonic creativity. It was, I think that Tears of the Kingdom, it did things that, like Matt said, will keep developers pushing for those mechanics in their games for years to come. The Ultra Hand was insane. In the first game, what made it so popular was how much freedom they gave you. And in this game, it seems like they somehow gave you even more. The ability to craft vehicles of whatever you want. I mean, you could make just insane creations. There are endless videos of them online, and that's another thing that, I think I really love seeing is everybody's funny videos of the wacky vehicles they created and them driving them around Hyrule. Oh man, I gotta say, Tears of the Kingdom had a real shot at winning Game of the Year, and I low-key did want it to win Game of the Year because my Game of the Year was not in the running. That was my official Game Awards, Game of the Year vote. I am glad that we will not be returning to the Breath of the Wild formula in the next game. However, if you have not yet played Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, as a Zelda fan, these are experiences that definitely need to be had. One of a lifetime kind of games. I loved Tears of the Kingdom, even though I do have, some very mild critiques about it.
Mild, you say? That's not what you went at me aggressively for when I said I like this game. Like, yeah, it's the first Zelda game.
Wait, no.
Man came at me hard. What?
Listen, I just spent 15 hours fighting other Zelda fans about why this game is not better than Wind Waker.
Man, Kyle was in the trenches with this game.
I was, man.
I thought that Tears was a phenomenal game as well. There was so much talk about it being $70, but to be honest with you, for how much content there is in the game, I've played about 50 hours of it. I finished the story, and there's still probably another 100 hours of stuff I can go back and do. Absolutely worth the price, and I think that of all the games you could talk about not being worth $70, Tears of the Kingdom is not one of them. It's a phenomenal game. Could have won Game of the Year, and again, I think back in May when we reviewed it, we all said, man, if this year holds up, Tears of the Kingdom could win Game of the Year, and it came damn close. I will go to the points real quick to give y'all an idea of just how close it was, because I haven't referenced any of the point totals. Our second place game finished with 25 points. Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Wonder finished with 22 apiece. So it was relatively close. It was a relatively close finish. There's a big drop off, I believe, from there. Yeah, Spider-Man finished with 18. So, it went 25, 22, 22, and then down to 18, and then from the top 5 on, it dropped big time from there. But again, Tears of the Kingdom, phenomenal game. We loved it, and it comes in at number 3. So we've come to the moment, fellas. And I have to say, before we get into this top 2, I almost feel like I need to make a speech. Because as the local Souls-like and FromSoft shill, I love that I've rubbed off on the two of you like I have. I love that I have, and that sounds sus. Pause on that phrase.
Pause?
But rubbed off on y'all. Pause. But I love that I have influenced the games that you guys now play, because this top 2 does my heart a lot of good. This top 2 makes me feel really, really good about the influence I have had on y'all. So, number 2. It was a game that I think all of us were looking forward to. A game with really awesome atmosphere, with excellent minute-to-minute gameplay, and I think a story that we were all relatively surprised by the depths of it. I think that we all got to the end of this game and we all said, man, there's a lot to unpack here, but man, they managed to tell a really damn good story in an environment that I never imagined we would see a good story in. That is why our number 2 game and our runner-up for the side mission game of the year in 2023 is
Starfield. I'm sorry.
I'm blocking you for that. Stack of shit. No, it's not fucking Starfield. Fucking mid-ass game. You've ruined the moment entirely. Man, fuck it. It's Armored Core 6. You've ruined the moment. It's Armored Core 6.
Armored Core 6?
Yep. Armored Core 6 finished at
awesome.
number 2 overall with 25 points. Go ahead and give you a little spoiler alert. Number 1, and I think we all know what that is at this point. Number 1 finished with 28 points, so it was pretty close. It was pretty close. The only difference was just Matt deciding to shit on this game and put it down at number 5.
Damn.
So that's the. Matt, I have the list pulled up.
I did.
I did. You over here trying to lie. I have the list pulled up.
Gaslight.
Like, you made it up. But on the real, honestly, when a game like Armored Core 6, I'm glad that it did finish in the top 2 and was in the running for Game of the Year for us, because it should have been at the Game Awards. It absolutely, and spoiler alert, our number 1 absolutely should have as well. There's no excuse for either of these 2 games to not be finalists for Game of the Year. Jeff Keighley, you botched that one, much like you botched the entirety of the show. But we won't get into that. We could do a whole fucking episode, and maybe, who knows, maybe later this week, maybe we should do an episode on the Game Awards and just how poorly ran they were. It might not be bad content, but
as soon as you start talking, just say wrap it up, please.
I just see the please wrap it up. I'm looking at the chat and Discord, and I see Kyle send the please wrap it up. But back on Armored Core 6, I mean everything I said. I was obviously trying to fool y'all a little bit when I said some of the things I said about it, but I think that everything I said about Armored Core 6 leading up to that reveal was very, very true. I think that the minute-to-minute gameplay was top-notch. It won Best Action Game for a reason. When you talk about just pure action gameplay, pure adrenaline, I don't know that there's a game that did it better than Armored Core this year in terms of just great action gameplay. I think that, especially with the customizability of your mech, being able to change up on the fly in between deaths, I think that just the different playstyles you could run, there was so much, Kyle, to love about this game. The gameplay was by far at the top of the list for me, but it also managed to tell a really good story as well.
Yes, dude. In terms of platinums this year, this game is one that pushed me. But I love a challenge. I really enjoy hard platinums, and this is one that I'm absolutely going to treasure. Because these S ranks were no joke. But the main thing that I think really, really stuck with me, that really made me want to, put this game so high up on my list, was just how much damn fun you have with this. Like, everything aside, you cannot go into this game and just not have fun. It's just pure joy. It's chaos. It's so good. And like, FromSoft is known for making hard games, and I would say that the Balteus fight the first time, that's hard, yes. Everything after that is not, because your options are expanded so wide after you beat Balteus, and then every mission after that. I I did an entire playthrough where I beat every single mission with the tank body and the Gatling guns with the songbirds on my shoulders, just to show that you can literally use one build to beat every level. Like, this game is so versatile. It's, it is niche, but I would say that out of all the games that people like to say it's not for everyone, Armored Core is, I would argue, for it's for a lot more people than I think it gets credit for. I've never played an Armored Core game. I'm not an Armored Core veteran. I don't even think I can name another mech game I've played. They're not that, popular, but this game was just so much fun from the very beginning, and I didn't go into this thinking I was going to get the platinum. I thought that, oh, there's no way. And when I beat it, I was so determined. I said, I love this game so much, I don't care how hard it is. I want this platinum. And, I'm not saying that if you play this game, you gotta go for the platinum, but I think that if you are on the fence, or if you have not tried this game, absolutely pick it up, because it's probably on sale now. It's been out for a few months.
It actually is on sale.
Yeah, dude, there you go. Go pick it up on sale, because it's such a fun game. It is pure joy, from beginning to end. I could not have loved it more.
I will say, despite saying that it was on sale and go pick it up on sale, and I agree with you, Kyle, take advantage of that 100%. I will say that at full price, the game is also absolutely worth it. There's so much replayability in this game. The missions are so much fun to go back and play through, especially if you're going for the S ranks. And I think, Kyle, when we talk about the S ranks and how difficult they were, and they were difficult, I feel like of the 60 missions in this game, I think that about 52 to 53, 54 of them were pretty straightforward S ranks. The remaining 6 to 8 S ranks, those put me to the test.
Yes.
Those challenged us. Those pushed us to places that very few games have pushed. I think that outside of Armored Core 6, the only platinum that has pushed me harder was Deathloop. Even our number one spot when we platinumed it,
yeah,
I don't think it pushed me as much as Deathloop did. Deathloop was a holy shit. I earned my gaming stripes. We earned our gaming stripes, Kyle, with that platinum. We absolutely did. But Armored Core 6 and Matt, I kind of alluded to this, and I have a grander point that I want to make that I'm going to end on with the rant when we get done talking about this game, because I have words to say about opinions that have gone around about this game and about a certain other niche game that Ho-Hum just won Game of the Year. But I'm going to save those words until I get through this point with you. Matt told a really, really good story. And it's a very, very simple story. It's an easy to understand story, but it's also got a lot of depth to it. Ultimately, you are a mercenary for hire that is trying to help these companies, that whether it's Balaam, Arquebus, the planetary force that's on Rubicon, you're trying to help them attain this mineral called coral, and it's basically a story of betrayal and backstabbing and working with one side to screw over the other, and then a few missions later you might be in the reverse position. It's such a really interesting story, Matt, and the biggest thing is it's complex, but it's not hard to understand, and I love that.
And I think that's exactly why I was drawn to it as well, and why I just wanted to keep playing it, was because the story it caught my attention. Like with how you said, it's not that complex, but really it does have a lot of a deeper core to it, especially if you're really paying attention to like the audio logs, which you definitely should be paying attention to those. And I love the fact that, just which way you go with it, like certain things change in the game itself, like who you're going up against, who you're fighting, and even going as far as who the final boss fight you're going to have is. Like, I think that is such an excellent way to weave through when you're making your story. You're keeping it interesting. It's not boring. It's not average. It's really good. And on top of that, great story, great gameplay. I'm absolutely happy that this game made it so high up on this list. So excellent game. I would love some DLC. Honestly, would love some DLC, and maybe one of these days I do plan on going back to Platinum it, which is going to be one hell of a ride. But it's one that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, you might have missed the boat on it being a little bit easier because they've absolutely they've patched some weapons relatively recently and made some of these S ranks a little bit more difficult. But I want to say the stuff that really stuck out to me was the spectacle of some of the boss fights, especially at the very end of the game. I think that the first ending I got was where you had to fight. I've realized, guys, we've been mispronouncing her name the entire time. We've been mispronouncing her name. It's not Air. Apparently, it's Ire. So the first fight, when you fight her at the very end of one of the endings, that fight is just bananas. That fight is nuts, and it's in space, and it's at this satellite station, and it's just such a great spectacle. It's so great. It's actually part of the background of my on my laptop's home screen now. So, and there's just the boss fights. The Cell 240 boss fight is great. The Ice Worm, another great spectacle fight. Balteus is a great opening fight and is a great skill checkpoint. There's so much to love about this game that, if I'm being honest, fellas, it bugs the shit out of me that people are still using the fact that it's a niche game against it. And that leads into my little rant that it has nothing to do with our number one game. I loved our number one game to death, and you're going to hear me sing its praises when we get there. But what I don't like, and what I can't fucking stand, is how Baldur's Gate has been praised because it's a niche game that stayed true to its roots, while that was the biggest negative against Armored Core. I'm not a fan of that personally. I'm not a fan that one game was praised for, in 2023, staying true to its roots, not adapting to modern gaming, not changing itself to suit modern gaming's needs or to suit the casual gamer. It pisses me off that we have had this conversation about FromSoft for so many years about how their games are unforgiving, the games are punishing, they have their formula, it works. They've yet to release an objectively bad game, specifically in the modern era. And yet, with Armored Core 6, that was the main thing that held it back when it came to reviews, when it came to people talking about it. And yes, Tom is going to hear this later. He was one of them. It's a point that I've heard him make, and it irritates me. He's not the only one. So, Tom, I'm not just hoeing you. I'm hoeing hundreds of people. But it bugs the shit out of me that Baldur's Gate was praised for something that Armored Core 6 was criticized for. And maybe, fellas, maybe I'm off base there. Maybe you both disagree with me. If you both disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. We don't always have to agree. I'm not going to be mad at y'all one way or the other. But I don't like that. It feels very selective. It feels very unfair to Armored Core. Either criticize both games for the fact that they stayed true to their roots or praise them both. I see no reason why one got praised while the other got criticized for it. So that's the end of my rant. I will get off my soapbox. Because, fellas, it's time to crown our 4th annual Game of the Year. And you've probably figured it out by now. There's been one sleeping elephant, one sleeping giant this whole time that we've not mentioned a single time. Matt made the joke a couple years ago with Rift Apart. Oh my God, what could it be? There's no secret. When Matt sent me his list and I had all 3 lists, I knew what our Game of the Year was going to be. Our Game of the Year for 2023 is Lies of P.
Let's go. I'm so happy to hear that.
Dude.
And another, again, I'm the reason why I'm very happy with that is, again, I love that I've had this influence on y'all that all of a sudden we all have a good love and appreciation for a really good Souls-like. We took our victory lap when it first came out, Kyle. We're going to take another victory lap again, goddammit, because, and I don't know if I should say that word or cuss like that necessarily, but it came out. But we're going to take another victory lap, by God, Kyle. It's the best Souls-like that's ever been created. Lords of the Fallen never matched up with it, never was going to match up with it. Kyle, this game was incredible.
Man, Lies of P was my game of the year because I fell in love when the demo came out. man, I was like, this game's gonna be hard, but I was all about it. The art style, best of the whole year. It got compared to Bloodborne a lot, but I mean, honestly, I don't think that using a game as your inspiration is bad as long as you know, make your game unique enough so you're not just cloning it. And I don't feel like this is a Bloodborne clone in any way. Bloodborne was absolutely an inspiration, and I think that makes this game better because it's so good. It's, man, my first Souls like that I beat by myself. I suck at these games. You know, I still play them. I play all of them. But I suck at them, and I not only played this and beat this by myself, I platinumed this by myself. This was probably my hardest platinum to date because while I was able to cheese a lot of the hard enemies and a lot of the boss fights with throwables, there was one thing that the game saved for me, and I goofed and should have used a guide on my first 2 playthroughs because I ended up having to do 2 more playthroughs without using a guide and goofed again. 5 playthroughs in, I have to fight the final boss, the Nameless Puppet. New Game Plus 5 is insanely hard because you can't use throwables hardly at all in the Nameless Puppet fight outside of the beginning of the second phase. I really had to just bite the bullet and get good. And by God, I did it. I got good, and I beat him. And that was, dude, that was my favorite platinum of this year. It's my favorite game of this year. I mean, I am just so proud that I did that by myself. You know, I've gotten carried through quite a few Souls games, and I love them to death, but there's just something about this game that I think it being single player absolutely worked because I don't think you could have got the same experience had you been playing, especially with the way that the story was set up. I think this being a single player experience, you know, it bummed us out at first, but by the time we beat this game, we appreciated it more for being that, and I still hold to that. I don't think this game ever needed multiplayer, and I think that the sequel should. I'm sorry, I cannot get over how great this game was, and I'm just so proud of myself for actually playing it, beating it, and platinuming it all, you know, on my own.
That was the cringiest shit you've ever.
Boy!
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, I agree on all fronts. I think that this game's story is really what sets it apart from other Souls likes. I think that it being this gothic reimagining, retelling, whatever words you want to use there, that sets up for a horrible joke that somebody's going to listen to later. But this crazy dark reimagining of the story of Pinocchio is just such a crazy. It's crazy how much it worked, and it's crazy how they were able to change certain characters around. Obviously, all of the animals from the story being just stalkers in the game that wear these animal masks, like the red fox, like, you know, the black cat, like Aladoro the hound. It's crazy how they were able to create all or reimagine all these characters as human beings, but they just happen to wear masks that are, you know, those animals they represent. So I loved that. I loved almost all of the performances in this game from a voice acting standpoint, especially Geppetto. Geppetto was so expertly voice acted, and I thought that in terms of more heinous characters, spoiler alert, if you couldn't tell that he was going to become evil at some point, that really is kind of on you. But in terms of villain characters, I thought that he was excellent. His heel turn was pretty obvious, but I thought he was one of the most evil villains that we went up against all year, and especially the evil ending. It's just so dark and depressing. I loved so much about this game. Kyle, you said it really, really well. Bloodborne was very clearly an inspiration to this game, but it does so much on its own merit to stand out that I can't really be mad that it was inspired by Bloodborne. And in fact, Bloodborne's a great game to be inspired by. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It's got great atmosphere, great level design. Realistically, the only real critique that I can have for this game is that at launch it was very unbalanced. But they fixed it. NeoWiz in round 8 fixed it pretty quickly within the first couple of weeks of it being out. So outside of that, the levels were maybe a little bit too linear. But that's not necessarily a huge negative. I thought the level design was really good still. So, Matt, you had this game at number 2 on your list. It was number 2 on my list. Why did you rank it so high, and what was it for you that you loved about this game?
I would say yes, Tears of the Kingdom was my game of the year, but Lies of P is more than deserving of the title as well, and that's why I put it second. It is a memorable game. I was so happy that, we've been wanting a sequel to Bloodborne for so long, and Lies of P is kind of like that. It's not the sequel, but it is in a way, in my opinion, a spiritual successor. Plus, I think it's very impressive that this developer that I've never heard of just came out here and knocked it out of the park and made a Souls-like game that is up there with some of the best from Software, library of games. And I have such a fascination with this, gothic horror art like take on Pinocchio and all these characters, and just like some of these boss fights were absolutely incredible. They are, like I said before, they are up there with some of the best from FromSoft. Especially what was it, the King of the Puppets, and then Romeo. Am I saying is that all right?
Romeo, the King of the Puppets. Yeah.
That right there was one of those fights that to this day I still think about because I loved how challenging it was, especially once you beat the King of the Puppets and you think it's over, but then Romeo pops out. And I think one of my only complaints about this game, and we talked about this on the episode, is just the phases of boss fights. I do hope they tone down on that in any future sequels. But yes, this game is going to definitely stand the test of time. I will probably replay it years from now, just like I have done Bloodborne in the past. And we haven't even gotten to the music, which I don't know who composed this game, but it's doing such an incredible job. I listen to the music like in the car, like it is so good. The voice acting is so good. I love I love the Legion arms. I think like it was so crazy how you could just mix up so much. The weapons in this game were great as well. Yeah, like especially the thing that's going to stick with me for a very long time is the artistic side of everything. Like it is gorgeous. It is the atmosphere is just bar none one of the most memorable in a video game I've ever played, and that's absolutely why I rank this game so high.
I was trying to find, Matt, while you were talking, I was trying to find who the composer was for the score. To believe it or not, on Spotify it doesn't have the composer listed. So I'm not sure if maybe Jiwon Choi, who is the game director, maybe he had something, maybe he worked with it. I'm not really sure. But to close out us talking about Lies of P, because again, I think that in a year where several games stood out, I'm not surprised whatsoever that this is the game that ended up at the top of our list, because I remember saying months ago that I believed this game was going to surprise a lot of people. And while, yes, it was very annoying how hard it was at first, Kyle, I remember the tweet that you sent me of before the patch when it was that guy that had a screenshot of all the ending trophies and just how low their percentages were. I believe they were all under 1%. There was a time when it looked like we would never be able to beat this game. Loxasia the Complete, I'm looking at you. You were the big roadblock for me, but I can now say, fellas, and I think all three of us can feel this in some way, shape, or form. I can look at the physical deluxe edition I have on my shelf now and be proud because I have that platinum. We overcame those obstacles together. Lies of P was a phenomenal game, and in a year where there were a ton of phenomenal games that stood out, for us, it stood a little bit higher than all the rest, even if Armored Core 6 might have been my own game of the year. But that's irrelevant. So, fellas, it's been another great year. Before we go,
yes,
because we didn't do an episode for this, and I just want to ask, of all the games that you've actually played, because it would be easy for all of us to say the day before because it's trash and it's awful, what was your least favorite game that you played that came out this year? What game did you play? Matt, I'll start with you, then Kyle, and then I'll give mine. What game did you play where you were like, God, I'm glad I never have to play that again after we do the episode.
Okay, let me think long and hard on this one. Um, I guess the most recently released Avatar, it's okay. I mean it's Far
Really?
Cry with an Avatar skin. Yeah, I'm sorry. A lot of the games that I played this year, I've really enjoyed, and they've all had us stuck with me. And as far as Avatar is, it's pretty to look at, but it's this is Far Cry with Avatar. I've played so many Far Cry games. It is literally Far Cry. Yeah, that's one of the games that I'm really thinking about at the moment. There might be another one. It's just like I said, it's been such a stacked year. I've played so many games, so it's not really one that I'm really able to exactly say which one. But Avatar is the one that's the most recent to me.
For me, it's probably gonna be Starfield. Because I just was not into that game. I love Bethesda, and I'm a big fan of their games. I think that they've done incredible work on the Fallout series. I do like the Elder Scrolls, even though I hate Skyrim. I love Oblivion, and I am excited for the next one. Starfield just didn't do it for me. It just was very, very boring in my opinion, and that's what I hated because I wanted to like that game. Just unfortunately wasn't for me.
Yeah, I will say, as somebody who I tried to see the charm in Starfield, I tried to see the good parts of it. I think the problem is that it was just really slow. And I can deal with games that start slow, but if I have to get 15 hours in before it gets good, that's not good enough for me. Sorry. So Starfield isn't my pick necessarily because well, lucky for you, Microsoft, a game called Lords of the Fallen came out this year. And I
Oh yeah.
I wanted to say Assassin's Creed Mirage. I wanted to maybe say Final Fantasy 16 because, unpopular opinion, I didn't think Final Fantasy 16 was that great. I thought it was good, but not great. I don't want to say Avatar because I think Avatar is a good game, but it's just not special. It's very bland. It's Far Cry, but Avatar, like Matt said. But Lords of the Fallen, I had really high hopes for. The trailers all look good. The concept of Axel and Axum and Umbral, the different realms that you could play in, were really cool. But God, Kyle, that game came out and just the performance wasn't good. The combat wasn't great. It was really slow and weighty, and it just didn't feel good like all the trailers had shown. And I think the biggest thing is that in a genre that is known for being cryptic, the story was so cryptic that at a certain point, I just didn't give a shit what was happening. At least in every other Souls game that I played, and every other Souls, I kind of knew what the story was. This one, right. I didn't know, and I didn't care to know. So, all the hype that it built up, I have to just say this to anyone out there that sees the Lords of the Fallen name and thinks, I can fix her. No, you can't. No, you cannot. Lords of the Fallen has had 2 chances, and neither one of them worked. Put that franchise to rest. So, fellas, that is going to wrap up this episode, I think. So, we're going to go ahead and call it there. That'll do it for this episode of Side Mission. Be sure to check us out on Twitter at Side Mission Pod. You can follow us on Facebook as well at Side Mission Podcast. And don't worry, this isn't our last episode for the year 2023. We do have some episodes coming as far as the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC, the God of War Ragnarok Valhalla DLC. Who knows? We might actually follow through and do one on the Video Game Awards because I think that would be an interesting episode. But we'll see on that one. But that's going to do it for us. For the boys, for Kyle Lynch, for Matt Beck, I'm Rusty Ellis. Thanks for listening. And as always on this episode, Merry Christmas, everyone.